Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on the new Visual Workflow Designer for Nitro Studio. Thank you for joining us today and appreciate your taking the time to attend and see what's going on. This webinar will be given by James, here, our VP of Operations. And first, we're going to mention a little bit about Crow Canyon Software. Some of you know us already. This is actually our 24th year we're starting. We actually were founded in 1999. We've been building Microsoft solutions on the Microsoft collaboration platforms for that time. And of course, we're deeply embedded now in SharePoint and Office 365. We are a Microsoft preferred business application partner. We've been for many years. California certified small business with offices in Rhode Island, Charleston, South Carolina, out here in the Bay Area where I am in California, and also we have a group in India helping us with the APAC region in that in development and support out that way. We're also on the GSA, the government contract schedule for government contracts. So quite well established with a good number of customers around the world. What we do is we have business applications that serve common business purposes, common business functions like help desk, request management, asset management, purchasing and equipment tracking, work orders. So some of you may be using those already and finding them quite useful. We also have the Nitro Studio Forms and Workflow platform, and the Visual Workflow Designer is part of that. So you'll dig deep into that today, into that aspect of Nitro Studio. We also have chatbots and apps for teams with a lot of development going on in that direction, bringing some AI services into it. Now we are, our Nitro Studio here, which we're focused on today, and specifically the Visual Workflow Manager. It's our forms and workflow automation platform we developed for Office 365 and Teams. It works in the commercial cloud. It works in the GCC, the government cloud, government community cloud, the one that the US government and other state and local governments are using, at least here in the US, and also in the GCC High now. The GCC High is a secure version of the GCC used for military and defense operations, and we're fully functional in that now. But as well as Office 365, we also run in SharePoint on-premises and have for many years, SharePoint 2013, 2016, and 2019. And we'll be moving over to the SharePoint, what they're calling the next edition of SharePoint on-premises. It's called the SE. Might have been called SharePoint 2022, but they're going to call it SharePoint SE because it's going to go to a subscription edition if you're interested in, if you're working on premises. So Nitro Studio has a number of components, a large number of components. And of course, we have the Forms Designer, the Visual Designer we'll talk about today, custom actions, portals, reports, omni-channel support, Teams integration, a whole slew of capabilities. We'll focus today on the Visual Workflow Designer. This Friday, we're having a special Nitro Studio demo for people who are new to it. Some of you are using it already familiar with it. But there's also, we're going to have for new people who are interested in Nitro Studio, either for developing business process automation solutions on Office 365 or SharePoint, or replacing InfoPaths and other legacy programs. We're going to be showing the more fuller aspects of Nitro Studio on Friday, this Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, which would be 1 p.m. Eastern. And we'll send out an email with that. It's not posted on our website, because it's more just for people who come to this webinar and a webinar we had last week. We're just specifically sending that to them, to the, you people who came to this, and you can sign up for that. We're going to put a link in the chat, and we'll also send you an email for a link for that webinar. But in addition to what's happening this Friday, we also have a number of events coming up that before we jump into James's presentation, I wanted to tell you about. We have 2 more workshops. One is going to be, let me get the dates here properly. You go to our website under resources, you'll see all our live webinars, live workshops. So here we have 2 upcoming ones. One is on knowledge base and the other is on AI, because we're focusing on how you can use the knowledge base more effectively. It applies a lot to help desk, but other programs, and also how we can infuse an AI, Microsoft AI services, Azure Cognitive Services, how we've infused that into Nitro Studio and how to take advantage of those aspects of it. It's quite an interesting field. There's also a number of other workshops James has done here if you want to go through and see those. But in addition, we have these webinars coming up. One of them is the one we're doing today. It's listed. And let me see if she got the third one up here. Well, okay. There's another one coming up. There's the one we're doing today. There's one a week from tomorrow on building better bots, ties in with the AI and the knowledge base and everything, but really how to use bots to accelerate IT support. And then we have one coming up on February 3rd, which will be supposed to be here, but it's not here. You'll see it there soon, which is about building a leave request system in Office 365. It's using Nitro Studio, showing all the different elements you can do to build a leave request system in Office 365 or SharePoint on premises, either one. Now, a couple of things I want to say before we jump into James's presentation. One is that this is being recorded. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll make that recording available by email to anyone who's registered or attended, and I'll put it up on YouTube, put it up on our website for a link, just like we have all these other webinars here that we have done in the past. You can view on demand. We have many webinars and interesting subjects you can go to. The second thing I want to mention is that there's a question box in this webinar. And we'll try to answer the questions during this webinar, but if not, we'll get to them after. But we do try to answer them. I'll be there while James is doing the presentation, trying to answer questions. By the way, I'm Scott Restivo. I should have mentioned that at the first. I do a lot of these webinars. I'm introducing this one, but James is going to take over and do the actual presentation. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the box. I'll be glad to answer. And, hope it's useful and practical. And James, go ahead and you can go forward from here.
All right, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Just a couple points I want to make on here before we get into the actual workflow designer piece. This is an upgrade to existing Nitro customers. So this is, if you're already using Nitro, all you have to do is hit the update button in your site, and this will be coming for on-premises customers a little bit later. We do have a package we're getting ready this month for the on-premises customers to get this update that has the visual workflow designer in it. Those customers already do have the custom actions designer, so you're going to be somewhat familiar with what we're talking about here. But this is we change what workflows will do in some ways, and some of the things you can do with it. So that's why I want to highlight the visual workflow designer here. But I just want to point out, if you're using Nitro Studio in your customer of ours, then you can go ahead and hit the upgrade button, and in the Office 365 world especially, you'll be able to get that update for the workflow designer. So with that being said, I want to kind of set the stage here a little bit for what we're going to be walking through. So what you see on the screen here is a list of requests. So it's basically just modeled off a request list. It could be any type of request, HR request, it could be whatever type of request you want it to be. But essentially, we've got these requests coming in. They've got some metadata, and sometimes, in this case, some of these requests are going to be internal requests from employees or external requests from customers. And so they're all hitting the same list here, and we're going to handle that in a couple different ways, and I'll show you what that looks like when it comes to the workflow side of it. But so I just want to point that out. To get the workflows going on this, we got to go to the Nitro Workflow Manager. And so to get there, we can go to Nitro Apps, which is this link here. It's just going to pop open your Nitro Apps page like this. Then we'll hit Workflows over here, and it's going to pop open your Workflows page. So this Workflows page has all the workflows for that site listed here. You'll see whether they're published or enabled. So if you have them published, you can enable them or disable them, and that allows you to decide when to have it run. Maybe you create a new one and you want to disable the old one, you can do that, but you don't want to delete it because maybe you want to go back to it, revert back, whatever the case might be. So you have those options, and that's going to be new for users of our workflow solution. That's going to be new for you. That's this whole, not the enabling part, but the publishing part. As previously, before this release, you update a workflow, you hit save, that update's committed, and any future workflows hitting the conditions to run it will run it. This allows you to actually save the conditions or save the workflow before you publish it. You can see I have this one that's not even published yet, which we'll walk through in some detail. So that's one of the big differences, one of the big changes that we've made for our workflow tool. And there's a couple others, and I'll get into those when we get into the actual design of the workflow. So the first one I want to show you here is when you set up a new workflow, we're just going to set up a simple one that's going to send an email when a request is submitted into the system, right? So we go to pick our list, and it's going to be our request list. This is showing all the lists from the site. We still do have an option to go back and use the legacy experience, which is the experience you'd be using today if you have the workflow tool. And it's basically just that list of actions that we have, and that's well and good. That's another important point I want to make, is that it's not going to disrupt your existing workflows. So if you've built out legacy workflows already, those are going to stay where they are. They will stay legacy workflows. There's no direct way to upgrade them, but you can reconfigure them in the designer workflow if you wanted to do that. But if you're developing new workflows and you want to use the designer interface, then this is what you would do. Select designer, select the event, like when do you want this to happen? In this case, we're going to do it when an item is created. So we're going to pop that, hit OK, and this is going to pop up our designer interface. So if you've used our custom actions designer, this should look somewhat familiar. And it's got a lot of the same elements, but some differences, but a lot of it the same. But the key part of it is this whole drag and drop visual way to see how your workflow is running, how it's going through the process, so you can really kind of see it. And another element I want to show you is the debugger tool, which we introduced into this workflow designer, the visual workflow designer. It's there for custom actions, but it has not been there for workflows. So this will give you a way to test your workflows before you commit them, which I think is going to be, maybe even beyond the visual piece of it, is going to be a huge value add for a lot of our customers. But we'll definitely talk about that debugger tool in detail when we get to it. But I just want to show you how easy it is to manipulate this. So you come in here, you have your workflow, you have a start node, you have an end node, and now you want to drag your actions onto it. So I popped open my list of actions over here on the left, and you see that there's a lot of different options we have. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. And if you're interested in that, I don't even know if we'll get to that in that demo that my dad was talking about. Scott's my father. We both have the last name Restivo, so we can just put that out there. But he'll be doing that webinar on the Friday, talk about Nitro. If you're really interested in getting the details of each of these actions, let us know and we can set up some time to talk about that. But for the purposes of this webinar, we're just going to set up a quick send mail action that's going to send an email to the requester that we received their request. So we have the send mail action over here. All we need to do is drag it and drop it, and now it becomes part of our workflow. You can see with the arrow is pointing into it, arrow coming out of it. It's now embedded in that workflow. And then when we open it up, again, if you're using workflows already, this should be familiar to you. These screens have not changed all that much. This is where you give it the action and name. So I'm just going to say notify requester. And we're going to give it a mail template. We just need to create a quick mail template for that. I'm just going to do a real quick one here, notify requester. For the name of the template, a subject line is going to say your request has been received. And then you could have a little note in here, say thank you for submitting your request. And you can actually pop in the person's name. So this is, let's see, I'm going to do requester internal for this one and just add that to body. Now, this is where we can have the branching come into play. I'll get into that in a little bit, but you could have a mail template that goes to the external user requesters and a mail template that goes to the internal requesters, and you manage that through using a gateway. But I'll get more into that when we talk about the kind of more complex workflow, I guess I could say. But you could leave it like this, quick mail template. Let's save that. Got there. We're just going to do a quick, who's it going to go to? Of course, it's going to go to that requester field, requester internal over here. And then we're going to do the from address, could be just a simple like no reply. Let's do no reply at our domain here, which is 365.cocaine365.com, and hit save. So now you can see that there was a error box there. Actually, it'll come up again if I delete that. You got this little error message. That tells you what's going on. And actually, if I hover over it, this is telling me that there are no outgoing node connections to the node, which means it's kind of orphaned. It's not going to do anything. We need to, do something here, and we put that in there. So we'll put that there. And now you can see that message goes away. Now, if we did something else to it, let's say it might not let me save it actually. If I delete this and try to save it, yeah, it's probably not going to let me do it. But if I drag a new one on here, let's see what the message says. And see, it's not configured at all. So it won't let me configure it with it won't let me save the configurations unless I get all the required fields in there, which is fine. And then it'll also tell me if there's no outgoing node, it's going to have a problem with it. And see, even in fact, affects this one up here because you see it says the node is not part of a flow connected to an end node. So pretty cool. You got the error message popping up right up front, tells you, hey, there's something wrong right away. Even if I go and try to save this, you'll notice I get a red highlight around the one that's not configured. So it gives you kind of real time, it's telling you something's not right, you gotta fix it. So that real time analysis, well, okay, I forgot to configure this, whoops, my bad. I'm gonna do update status, and I'm going to add a column mapping. Again, this is should be familiar to you if you've been using our tools. And I'm going to mark it as in progress. Update, save. And now that message goes away, we can save it, and then we just have to give it a name, notify requester. And we'll hit OK. And there you go. So now it's success. And now you have this debugger mode. I'll walk through that. Actually, I'll show you now what it looks like, because I think it's pretty cool. You can select an item to start with, hit OK, and it's going to walk through the workflow, basically. And you can see if it's going to have a problem anywhere in the process and address it in real time. So you don't have to go back and run it, dig into your workflow, figure out what went wrong, dig in through the logs. It's kind of like giving you those real-time logs as you go through it. It does take a little time to get up and running to start it, but once it goes, you'll see it runs through the process. And we're going to check the conditions for the workflow, which there are none, so it's good to go. We're going to hit this action called notify requester, and you see the type it is, and then it's going to take the next step, which is going to prepare the email essentially and send it out. Here's the email item, and you see it says it was successfully executed. And then we can go on to the next step here. And you see the update status is in progress, and then we're going to save that item. And they successfully executed. So if there are any errors in the process, you would see those as you go through it. So that's a fairly simple workflow. As I mentioned, we can make it a little more complicated, a little more complex. We can add in what we call a gateway. We can put this gateway over here. And now you got a label 1, and now we have to have a label 2, which is fine. We'll go ahead and hit another send mail action, because like I said, we probably have one which is internal, which is external. In this case, we're going to do internal here. And then if we get an arrow over, whoops, get that over here, I can move that around so it can actually change where it goes. And all this stuff is movable as you go through it. So if I want to put it up here, I can drag it. You see that connection sticks. If I want to put it down here, that connection sticks. But I can leave it here for now and do external. And so I would configure a template here to go to an external, and then I can loop back into this workflow to update status, take that one action, whether I go this node or that node, it's going to come back and hit this update status and then go to end, or I can have it directly go to end. I'll just delete that whole arrow configuration, just go directly to the end, and then I'll just move my arrow to make it a little more obvious what's going on here. And so you can kind of see how that works. You got a decision point, which you can configure, and then it'll decide which way to go in the flow of the process. And you can see that. So it makes it really easy to see where you're going, what actions being triggered from what step. You can see all that. So it's really really great for doing that. And then what I want to show you next is a somewhat more complicated workflow, and which I'll walk through in some detail here. But it looks something like this. So here you got a couple nodes, you got a couple gateways, and you're going a couple different directions, right? So we have our of course we decide, is this an internal request or is it an external request? And let me pop open that gateway to show you what that looks like. So this is where we're putting our conditions, and we're saying, what's the request type? So in this case, we're saying request type is internal. So if that's the case, those conditions are matched, we're going to go the internal route. And if the conditions are not matched, we're going to go the external route. In this case, I only have 2 choices, makes it really easy. But you can, if you have multiple choices, like 3, 4 choices, you can also add additional gateways to make those checks. Like you say, okay, is it internal? And, then you have internal, not internal. And then you have your next step would be like, okay, is it external, external, not external? And then you can kind of cascade your gateways that way. But, it's pretty easy to see which way it's going to go. Through this interface. So in this particular workflow, just to kind of give you a broad overview of it before I get more into the details, it's going to decide, it's going to find the approver, because we have approvers. If I go back over here to my request list, we have a companies list and we have a departments list. So departments is going to be our internal approvers, company will be our external approvers, and then you'll have, you want to reference each of those lists, you want to get the information from those lists, and that's what we're going to do over here. So this is what this is called a query list action, and the query list action is a way to go and get information from another list in your SharePoint site. So if you wanted to go get information from this, who's the approver for this internal request, well, we have to key that off the requester's department, and we're going to get that from the departments list. And then we've also added a variable in here to get that approver. So we're kind of self-referencing this item. You can see it's got the same name here: QL get approvers, QL get approvers, and it's just saying we're going to, the list that's associated with this query list action, we're going to get a field from there, and that field is called approver. So we're going to pop that into our variable, and then we're going to keep going in our workflow. So then we got a couple of variable options. And so this is actually going to be new for people who've been using workflows already. We have this new set variable action. So previously you had to do it the way I just showed you in the query list. You could, well, at the first level, you can configure a variable up here at the top. So if you wanted to set a variable value and just say, okay, it's going to equal 0, it's going to equal something else, you can set that here at the top. And then you can replace that or set that value as you go through the process through these either update item actions or query list actions. You can update that approver, and then you can use that information further down in your process. In this case, though, we have a set variable action, which allows you to directly input what you want that variable to be, and it can be somewhat dynamic. As what we're doing here is we're setting a requester field, and this is basically just getting the requester name from that internal requester field on the request list. And then we're setting a message here, which is going to be a message that, it's going to be a string concatenation of that requester value. So we see we're referencing that, variable right here to get that requester. So that's going to be dynamic based on which request is being acted on, and it's going to come in here. And basically we're saying that message. So we got the message, and then it goes through the process to another gateway to say, is that approver? Did we find an approver? Yes or no? And if we did, we can go this way and create an approver task. If the approver was blank, we can go this way and get the approval not required. And then you can see we're using those some of those variables in here like so. So let's go here. So you can see there's that approver value, which is that approver variable. So that's what we got from our first query list action. And then there's that message we set is basically going to be the title of the task. So if you go back here, you can see this is an internal request for the requester, whoever that requester is. And you can see we kind of go a different route over here with setting company value and setting the message is slightly different. You can say this is an external request for the company. So you got different ways you can use that variable. But you see what happens is we got the same variable there, but we're putting different information into it. So you can actually dynamically even have whether it's different strings of text based on which node you run through. So this builds up the message to be, this is for an external request, this builds up the message to be internal request, but both of those go to the same approver task. So it kind of helps to keep your workflow a little more optimized, I guess you could say. We don't have all these different options of, we put this condition here and it's going to run all these sets of actions. We'll have different approver tasks under the nodes. It allows for some consolidation there a little bit in what your workflow is. It makes it a little easier to work through. Yeah, essentially, you got the request that's coming in. It's internal request, so it's going to run down this node. External request, it's going to run down this node. And then you might be wondering, well, how do I know which node it chose? How do I know what that set the variables correctly? I actually did a lot of this yesterday, trying to get those formulas exactly right. I just run through it and get that, something that didn't look right, I changed up the formula. And how I did that, it's really great because it's the debugger tool, which I already showed you about. It makes a little more, it's going to look a little better here. I didn't think I made any change, but that's okay. Hit debug. And now we just got to select an item to run from, which is fine. And we're going to select this one. And I know this one, request for supplies, was using an internal requester. It's an internal request. So it should go down that internal node over here. So again, this is going to take a little time to warm up, but you see, I can actually move this around and see where I'm at. So if I have a large workflow, I can go from here. I can have, as it goes down the list, I can move it up and see where it's going and what's happening. So green is going to be kind of where it's at in the process. So if I hit here, it's going to highlight this in green, and then move down. Yellow is kind of where it's going. Right now, it's going to do that evaluation. So we got the gateway. It's going to check? Is it internal or external? So it runs that check, and it shows internal, which is the expected result. So good. We're good. We're moving along here. And then we hit continue because we're going to do our query list. And you can see actually, it tells you what the query is going to be, and then it's going to run that and get the information. So you can see here, I have my variable approver. Here's what I had in the for the expression in the settings, and here's what I got. And don't worry about having all this text here. This is kind of normal for person or group fields, so our system handles it just fine. But you can see this is what gets returned. And you see, okay, we got a value here of Pavan, of the person who's the approver. So we have a value. We're good. So let's move on. And we're going to set that requester to whomever. Again, we set that to. We have this function here to get get the name. Again, I ran through this a couple times. I had just that requester field and pulled all this extra extraneous stuff, and then so I'm like, okay, I need to do some kind of function. So I put the function in there, and I got my name, and that's good. And then we go through the message, and you can see here, it got the message right here, and then I had to kind of play around with the settings and get it just right. But you can see if I ran into a problem at any one of those steps, I can just hit cancel and fix it. If I want to go fix it, I can just say, you know what, that doesn't look right. This request for, this is a request meant for, I don't know, I can just change it and just have it look a little different. Hit OK. Like, okay, that maybe that's a better message now. Let me go ahead, save that, and go back into my debugger. I'm going to select that one that I know is the internal. And it takes a moment to come up, but once we get there, and you can see these logs. So if you wanted to go back and see that the log for each one of these nodes, you can actually click this show log function. Once we get it going, you'll see what I mean. So I hit OK. And now we can specifically show the log for that node. So if we want to go back, if we get lost in this string of text over here, we can hit that little I button, and it's going to bring up the nodes. You can see this one's not, this is where we're at. We haven't done it yet. Hit continue. And then hit that I, you can see, okay, here's what was actually evaluated. Then you can pull that out. I mean, you can see it's not that much information, but again, if you get kind of lost over here, oh, I don't remember, what did that actually pull back? What was the variable? Oh yeah, okay, let me go back and hit that I, and then I can see what was actually returned. So continue. So I'll go through this again. It's just going to take a moment to do that. We'll hit continue, continue, continue. You see there's my message. It's meant for instead of for, which, I like for better. I just want to show you that you can quickly make a difference there. And then, just going to do the next step and then move on. So now it shows, because we got an approver is not blank, and that's good to go. So you can follow, again, you kind of drag this around and see this through the process. And then we could, so rather than adding the task, and we can just go ahead and cancel that out. Or, we can see, actually, let me go ahead and see what it looks like. So even at this point, we've prepared all the information to save this task, commit this task to the SharePoint list of approver tasks, but we can decide not to. You say, I'm doing a test. I don't want to clutter my list with a bunch of stuff. I know it's worked up to this point. All that information looks great. I know it's going to work okay. I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel, because the next step was just the end anyway. So that's where the value of the debugger comes into play, because you don't have to go and dig through all these workflow logs and figure out what happened. Why did it go awry? Why did it set the message to be this instead of that? Why is there an extra character in my approver? Like why? All that information is much more in your face, upfront, readily available. And you can see if we can go run through another one just to show you that it works going the other way too. So request for information, I know for my setup, it's request for information is an external request. So that's why I chose that one. I like to center this a little more. And then now we're going, we're going to hit continue. See, it just runs through the process, and now it's going to check the gateway and chose the external route. So you got that going, and it's just going to run through the process. So I won't go through all that, but it kind of shows you, okay, at least at that point you can say, okay, I know this gateway is going to work. And then if you want to, you can skip it, and it's going to skip it down, and that kind of helps to move things along. You kind of skip it, so these values are not going to be set. It's going to give me wrong information, but that's okay. I just wanted to kind of see where we're going in the process. And you can see here, it's prover wasn't blank, so it's going that route again. That's fine. So yeah, so that's the value of the debugger. So if you get any errors along the way, you'll see them, and just gives you a way to build that out and kind of see where you're going in the flow. So I think it's really, really awesome a tool for that. But yeah, and it's just easy to build it out too. Let's say I wanted to, we add this approver task, but are we notifying the approver? No, we're not. Okay, so let's go ahead, drag this on here and configure that action. So now you can build it out a little further. Or if you had a different person you need to notify if approval was not required, you could go drag and drop. Okay, now I can build out a send mail action. And again, you can move this stuff around, make it a little, something got a little funky with that, that's okay. Make it a little different. And you can always add in your nodes and try to make it, if you want to get like exactly 90-degree angles, you could do that if you need to. And then we'll just go ahead and add our final arrow there. And you can see it's just, now we're going to get the error that's just not configured. Please configure action node settings. And then if you get a really big workflow, you can actually hit the control button and the minus button on your keyboard, and you can make it smaller so you can see the whole thing in full, and move your canvas around. You can move it up to the top right, and then you could hit the plus button and get a little, zoom in, control plus, and you can zoom in a little more. If you want to get, you don't want to get that close, but you might need to, I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of options there. There's a lot of other stuff in here, and it wasn't, I don't want to go through every single thing in excruciating detail, but I will mention a few other options we have within the workflow designer, which is it's not there for the custom actions, but we have things like manage permissions. That's one we've had there. So it's great for the workflows. And then also want to point out these web services. So we can connect out to other web services and have some additional things that can happen outside of SharePoint. You have a process that connects over to QuickBooks or connects over to Salesforce. You need to go run a web service to do that. You can do that from within a Nitro workflow. And then there's options for connecting to Teams as well. We have this great connection with Teams. We could have a bot in Teams that receives a message, sends a note to a person, maybe it sends a card to an approver to say, hey, we want to have you approve this item. You can link over to the item, see the information, and approve it. And that can all be done through workflow as well. Then a couple things that are newer for customers who are on the call who might not know about this yet. We have a parse CSV action. So we can take a CSV file, like that kind of funky Excel file, and without any formatting or anything in it. And we can parse that and bring it into a SharePoint list. So I know SharePoint has that import from Excel option, but that creates a new list. This is there for when you want to add to an existing list or populate an existing list. You can use this parse CSV action. Very similar, folks on the call are familiar with our Excel to SharePoint tool. We've used that in a number of with a number of our customers. Works very much the same, but now it's within the context of SharePoint rather than a separate Windows client tool. And another thing we recently added in here is this generate document action. And again, we had that for custom actions, but now we've got that available for workflows where you can go and generate a PDF or a Word document. You can base it off of a template and just kind of show you what that looks like. Very similar to what we had before. but you could base it off of a template that you put into Word or Excel, or with our print manager tool. You can create a template, and then you save it to a particular library. You can have dynamic path names. So if you want to have it go to a particular folder, you could do that. Dynamic file name. So if you wanted to give it some unique name, you can do that. Then you have the option, PDF or Word document. I think that's based on what type of item we have here. So if we do a Word document, you can save it as doc or docx. If you have it as Excel, as your template, you can save it as, actually save it as an Excel. Item print template, you have the option to do PDF or Word. So anyway, a couple different options there for the generate document action. But I do want to point out that that's a new feature available for our workflow tool. And that may, just some of our existing customers may not be aware of that, but I do want to point out that it's there. So yeah, if you ever need to remove these from your flow, it's easy enough to do that. We can, there's a trash can button. You just hit that, gets rid of it, takes it back a node. And again, if you ever have a point where you're not, something goes awry, it's like, okay, it's going to show me where it went wrong. Save that. Whoops, I got a couple things not quite right. So that's the run through of the workflow designer. I think it's really, really great option for seeing how things are flowing through your system and how they're flowing through your workflow, your process. So I think with that, was there any questions that we needed to pop into?
Oh yeah, that's quite a complex workflow you got going there, James. It's all over the place.
A little
Yeah,
bit.
no, that's but you're really showing the power and capabilities of the program. Did you mention about exporting and importing different workflows, perhaps, and looking at the version history at the
Oh, great
top?
point. Yeah, version history. That's another new feature we have here. Thanks for pointing that out. I forgot the version history is not here because it hasn't been published yet, but it's going to save all the published versions, and it's going to show you if you want to revert back. You can do publishing comments like you did with like you can do with our workflow tool. We do like first version, confirm, and now I should get a version history there. So that's another thing. That's another huge value add that wasn't there before, is the ability to revert back to previous versions of workflows that or who changed workflows, or when was this changed. We did have some of that information, but this gives it a little more robust, or a little more interactivity with it, and you can also restore and go back, which you couldn't do before. So it gives a lot more, definitely a lot more power. I can't. Yeah, I want to make sure I get this out there. We have it on good authority that this debugger tool specifically is better than what's there in Power Automate. So I'm just putting it out there. If you're using Power Automate, you feel free to agree or disagree, but that's what I've heard. So I think between that, the version history, all the actions, I mean, this is just a phenomenal tool for business process automation.
There's also the export import option, right? You can do if
Yes.
you want to export out and save it, because a lot of people want to save a workflow, in case of backup or something goes wrong. You create the complex situation like James has here. You want to be able to save it and then import it back. Of course, the other thing is import. When you create a new one, you can import, into it. The other side of the coin is importing it in. So this is export because he's looking at the existing workflow, but if you did a new one, you could do import from that file that you saved from the export. So it's a way of backing up the workflow also, which is very important for, if somebody screws up or you have some problem, you have a fail safe to go back and import it in when you have JSON stuff. Yeah. So if you did a new workflow, you'd get option to import it, right, James? If you did that new workflow somewhere.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I think that I didn't prepare for that one specifically, but I think we can just run through it real quick. Where is it?
Yeah. I mean, just showing you. Okay, people are starting to ask questions now, so we'll get into it, and but let's show that importing capability. And
yeah, let's show that real quick.
Yeah, it's just import. That's all.
Yeah, because there are definitely
see the import,
yeah, there's the import button right there. So we could take that one we just downloaded and hit the select files and get that and import it right in. So that's yeah, it's makes it easy. And then if you want to, and especially if you wanted to change, there's some settings and condition stuff I didn't go into too much up here, but if you want to change when to start the workflow, that's a great way to do it. Is you export it out, just import it back in, and say, you know what, I want this to be when the item's updated, not when it's created, or vice versa. Then we can do that. And,
Yeah,
then we can do that.
tremendous amount of flexibility. And also the other thing, this also works for our custom actions. This is, which you
Yep.
just you showed in a workshop earlier, but just to
Yep.
emphasize that point again, it's not only in our Nitro Studio, we have Nitro Workflows, which are these event triggered or system triggered things like, mostly what James was talking about here. But there's also custom actions, which are buttons on the form or in the ribbon that user initiated by pushing the button. It's the same idea here. Actions
Yeah,
are pretty much
exactly.
the same. There could be
Right.
slightly different actions, like generate a document or something inside of custom actions that aren't in the workflow. Here,
Well,
there's
generate documents there for workflows now, but yes,
oh,
there are a couple others.
yeah.
Yeah, launch URL, I think. There's key differences, but yeah, the functionality is the same. You can kind of see I did it's something fairly similar to what I was talking about on today's workshop earlier, but it's kind of the same idea.
Well, let's check on the questions, James, because there's a number that came in, and let's go
Yeah.
through those. Can you see those, or do you want me to?
Yeah, yeah. Let me take a look. Someone made a point that the version history is not there in Power Automate either for the restoring of previous versions. So that is also
Okay, okay,
another
yeah.
benefit.
Well, the other point, before I want to get the next question, one other point about it is Invoke Workflow can include instantiating a Power Automate workflow if you want.
That's right. It can, yeah.
It could, of course, it launches our workflows, SharePoint workflows, or Power Automate flows if you have one
Yep.
created. So you just got to put the information in. So you can integrate this quite well. And like you, I think you're saying that the custom action can invoke a workflow.
Yes.
There's all kind of, just let us know what you want done, and we'll probably can do it with this system. That's basically it.
Yeah, it's pretty limited on things we can't do.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, so you can look at the other questions there.
Yeah, I'll get into it. All right, question about, can you export the workflow and import it to another farm, e.g. test to production? Yes, you can. And the only thing you want to be careful of there is that the schema and the internal names of the columns are exactly the same, because a lot of times what you're doing is using references. Let me pull up in that workflow I had before over here. Now, where was it? Let me close this. Okay, save the changes. Yeah, open this one. So when you're working through it, as you're aware, there's going to be internal names, extra, display names, internal names. You want to make sure those are going to be the same. Otherwise, you just have to go through and update those references. But yeah, essentially yes. Once it's a JSON file on your computer, you can import it to anywhere you need to. All right. Can a workflow periodically check a server directory for new files and execute actions based on the file name? That's a good question. I seem to think we could do that. We
Yeah,
definitely have we have a scheduled query workflow, which let's pop this open again. We have a scheduled query workflow which runs on periodic basis, and then its connection to the server, I think we'd have to use that invoke web service or invoke Azure function, one of those two options. But there is, when we go to a new workflow here, you'll see that one of the options is to do a scheduled workflow. And so let me just pull up my request list here. Hit OK. And when we go into the settings of that, you'll see the schedule could be every hour, every day, a particular hour. And so that's going to run the workflow. Again, it could invoke a web service. It could invoke another, Power Automate. It could invoke a design, SharePoint workflow. Whatever you need to do. I don't think there's, other than those options, I don't know that there's a direct way to query information on a server. But once we do that, if we use that invoke workflow, let's say we use the invoke web service option, we can pull back that information that you're talking about and pop that into a variable perhaps. There's variable mappings where you can get the information from the web service, though that data comes back, we pop into a variable, and then we take additional action based on that, which it could be based on file name. So if variable equals X and that X equals the file name, then that would it could do additional action. So I think with combination of this and using the variables, yes, that should be possible.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's a matter of just querying the server. Of course, that has to be available to the server, and asking if a new file has been there. The
Mhm.
other option is to do something on the server that sends a message the other way that says a new file has been added. So either it most likely can be done one way or the other. I think there's it's just the server. Something happened on the server. A new file was added.
Yep.
Either the server notifies the workflow, or the workflow goes out and looks at it periodically. I'm pretty sure it can be done. I mean, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
It seems very possible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And a question about will we be providing new installs with the new workflows? I think this is in reference to our applications. At this point, we haven't gone through our applications and upgraded the workflows to the designer workflows yet. And
Well,
there
I
isn't
think
a
that
direct way to convert, but
right,
yeah,
right, right. That's exactly what I was going to point out to you, James. Is that we don't have a direct conversion legacy to designer, but usually if you just line them up side by side, they're pretty easy to recreate, because if you look at a legacy one, we might want to show a legacy one briefly, and it's just the same set of conditions are at the beginning of it, at the top of the legacy, and then the actions are down in the section called actions. And what
hmm
you end up with is the top part is like the conditions in the new workflow designer at the top, and then the actions part are just now visual instead of listed there as a text list at the bottom, where you're starting to see that
yeah,
section one actions. That becomes very, very much the visual part of what you're talking about right there,
yeah,
with all
yeah,
the other really cool features that come along with the visual workflow designer.
yeah,
So,
exactly. So yeah,
so I'm
that's
just
right.
saying it's probably not a heavy lift to go from legacy to designer if you want to, but you have to manually convert them, right?
Yeah, it really isn't. I mean, even if you have several actions here, I converted one of our workflows. I think it was a custom action, but the same idea. It had probably like 10 or 11 or a dozen different actions, something like that. And there's the various conditions. And it did take some time, but not that long to convert it over, and was able to convert it. And even in that conversion process, you can pick up some efficiencies. You can say, oh, why am I doing that? Why am I checking for that? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So you
Well, and
kind of even
the
fix it.
gateways had a lot too, James, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, the gateways kind of tell you which way you're going. Like, why do I have to check this node at this point? And so it gives you another way to, it's visual. I mean, if you're a visual person, it's just a much better tool for designing workflows. So even if you have the legacy ones, I encourage you to convert them.
Yes, yes, and also we're adding new features, right? Some of the for each loops and the if then.
Yeah, yeah, that's another big thing. Like we had this set variable we recently added into the whole library of tools available. And as we go through it, we're going to add more features like that. We'll have instead of gateway, we might have more of a state management type of tool, which could handle more than two conditions. So that's going to be coming down the line. So if it may not be there today, but it will be there, before the end of the year probably, if not, even before the summer.
Yeah, it's one of our active projects because we're following what they call the BPMN notation 2.0. It's business process management notation, BPMN 2.0, and making this our workflow designer accord with those standards so that eventually it could be exported. You could do something in like a Visio type designer and import it in here and export it out. So, trying to broaden the reach of the workflow designer so that it's not just, I mean, SharePoint specific at this point, and Office 365 specific and Teams specific, but we're extending it, into more of a BPMN 2.0 kind of world. And then if you had something designed in a tool like that and you wanted to implement it in our system, that would be possible. Not yet, don't get, but just really emphasizing how important workflows and processing are to the whole system of creating a solution in whatever you're trying to automate.
Yep,
Right? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so it's great. So yeah, if you want to learn more about Nitro Studio, if you're either current customer using an application and not Nitro, or if you're a new potential new customer and want to see more about it, sign up for that webinar on Friday, a couple days from now.
Yeah, put it in
And
chat, the link in chat, and we'll send an email about it.
yep, and so you can learn more. But yeah, so this is, like I said, this is a great tool. It's there. If you're on Office 365, go update Nitro, you have it. You can just start playing with it today. On-prem customers, I promise we'll have this out very soon.
We'll
And
notify the
yes,
people too, right?
yes, yeah, well, yeah, we have a whole. I'll double
Notification.
check for the individual who asked that. I'll check to make sure they're on our push notification list. But we do have a push notification list for when the on-premises package is released. Last couple of releases came out on that. So if you didn't see it, let me know. And just you might want to check your junk mail, but I'll double check to make sure you're on that list.
Okay, well, great, James. That was really good. A great presentation and a great tool that we're glad to introduce at the start of 2022. And that people start using this, can give us any feedback, what they like, don't like, what they want to see additional to it. We'll be glad to hear. Meanwhile, we do have a couple other webinars and workshops coming up on the knowledge base, on accelerating IT with bots, on doing a leave request system, Nitro Studio demo. We're very actively involved here in a lot of presentations and encouraging people to move forward with automation and Office 365 and Teams. We're doing a lot with Teams. If you're using Teams, let's talk how we can help you with that. And also on-premises, a lot of on-premises work too. And we have this dedicated Azure now for people who need secure environments. We're in the GCC High. So very active world going on here. And thank you for joining this webinar and learning more about Crow Canyon software, more about our Nitro Studio, and particularly the Visual Workflow Designer. So James, again, thank you for the presentation today, and
Sure.
thank you everyone for joining.
All right, thank you all.
Take care. Okay, take care. Okay, have a good day. Okay, bye.